It's another edition of Time About the Movies, and today we're taking a look at the films of May 3rd, 1996. We have 8 movies to look at today, so let's not waste any more time. Let's jump on into it, and we'll start off with the biggest new release of the weekend, the supernatural horror teen film, The Craft. So as you can tell, The Craft is about these 4 teenage girls who pursue witchcraft for their own gain, and they each experience negative repercussions because of that. The movie was a big hit when it came out in theaters, and it went on to actually have a huge cult following over the years. So much so that a sequel was made not but 3 years ago, which I've only seen little bits and pieces of it. And I'm going to tell you right now, it wasn't very good. At least in my opinion, it wasn't very good. But I was actually kind of surprised when I saw this movie. I saw it a couple years ago. It was on Freeform's 31 Nights of Halloween. I watched it for the first time, not going into it expecting a whole lot, and really I was pleasantly surprised by what I saw here. It was actually kind of a slick, cool-looking film that kind of was perfect for the 1990s, the late 1990s, because you could definitely see a lot of the 90s flair in that movie. Needless is not because of the fact that it also had some notable '90s names in there. I mean, Nev Campbell was on Party of Five. This was before Scream. Farousa Balk, who was going to be in The Waterboy a couple years later. Robin Tooney, Rachel True. The visual design of this movie is, like I said, very '90s. It's a very '90s movie, but a fun kind of '90s film. I actually kind of prefer, in comparing this to something like Hocus Pocus, where you actually had real witches, like. I prefer this movie a whole lot better than Hocus Pocus. You know me, if you've been watching my stuff over the years, been following the stuff I've been doing on this site over the years, I am not the biggest fan of Hocus Pocus. I am not a big fan of that movie at all. But this movie, however, I was actually really surprised at how much I enjoyed it. I like the chemistry between the 4 girls. The visuals are actually they actually do hold up after all these years. And, like, the style of the film is very slick and interesting. There are some flaws here and there. The tone can go a little bit. The tone is all over the place at times. Some of the writing is most of the writing in it is okay, but there are definitely elements where you can definitely tell they're trying to get a message out there, and it's not really well thought out. But then again, it's not hurting the film at all. Like, you can still really enjoy the film and watch these characters do what they have to do in order to get the story going. And it is still a lot of fun to watch. Like, it really does work because of the 4 main leads. They actually did a pretty good job of casting these characters very well. And it's actually a really solid film. It's a movie that I would have never really given a second thought to the first time I saw it. But I was actually really surprised at how much I really enjoyed it. It's a solid film. I can definitely see why it has had the following over the years. I'd highly recommend checking it out. It's kind of a fun little film from the 90s. The Craft, really good film. So... that's The Craft. Let's go on to the next movie, and that is the comedy, The Great White Hype. Essentially, here you got a satirical comedy about racial preferences in boxing, and boxing in general is satirized here. But you also have 2 inspirations for this. Larry Holmes' 1982 fight with Jerry Cooney, which, if you're like me, you first heard about Jerry Cooney when he cameoed on The Simpsons back in the day, but he was known back then as the Great White Hope. And then there was also Mike Tyson's fight in 1995 when he returned versus Peter McNeely that played a huge inspiration to this. It's directed by Reginald Hudlin, who also did House Party and Boomerang, so he was still on kind of a roll here. And it was written by Ron Shelton, who also wrote Bull Durham and White Man Can't Jump. So you'd figure with those pieces together, plus the amazing cast they have here. I mean, Samuel L. Jackson, Peter Berg, Damon Wayans, Jeff Goldblum, John Lovitz, Cheech Marin, Jamie Foxx. Just a cast that good should be enough to make this movie worth watching in the end. Not so much. I mean, it's not a bad movie. It does start off pretty strongly, but then in the second half, it just kind of... the biggest problem with it is that it feels kind of rushed. It's only an hour and a half long, which you would think with a comedy like that. With a comedy, you don't want to overstay your welcome, yeah. But if they added maybe another maybe 15-20 minutes to this probably would have been something interesting, something fun. But in the end, you don't really get that excitement that you think you're going to get with a movie like this. Like, it feels like the movie's trying to rush itself along. There's never a sense that they want to tell a good story here. They just want to make a movie that's quick to get out there and people can see it and then just head out and go about their day. It's like vapor, honestly. And it starts off strongly, but it just doesn't have that spark at the end, in the second half, to really keep it going all the way through. It feels kind of rushed. Like, the actual the actual fight itself at the end of the movie feels very, very rushed. It doesn't feel like a movie that really delivers on everything it promises. There's just so much potential there with what they could do with this, and it never really gets going when it needs to get going the most. It feels like there's just so much there that they're trying to do otherwise from the actual purpose of the movie. It just never feels like it gets the direction that it wants to go in. And it was a real shame that wasn't that way, because everybody in here is doing the best they can. There are funny moments in this movie, but it just doesn't really stick the landing at the end of it when it's all said and done. It feels like a movie that has a lot more potential than they actually showed in there. It's a big disappointment. I was really looking for a lot more from this, especially from Reginald Hudlin, who was actually on kind of a roll after this point. But yeah, unfortunately, it just doesn't really fit that. It just doesn't really stick the landing at the end. So, a disappointment to say the least. That's the Great White Hype. So let's go ahead and move on to the next movie, and that is Sharon Stone in Last Dance. Yeah, this probably didn't help that this came out only 6 months after Dead Man Walking came out, which was which was a far superior movie, and actually won an Academy Awards, several Academy Awards, I should say. But yeah, there's no real reason to look at this movie except to compare it to the far superior movie that came out only 6 months afterward. Um, Sharon Stone's trying her best here. I mean, this is a performance where I think she's okay, but she's not doing anything really spectacular to make it stand out on its own. The story, there isn't really a whole lot there. This is a story that doesn't really have a whole lot of intrigue. There's nothing really exciting about it, and we know how it's going to end. There's nothing about this ending that's going to surprise anybody if you've seen the movie. And for Bruce Beresford, who had been created an Academy Award-winning film with Driving Miss Daisy only 7 years prior to this, his career kind of took a downfall after after that movie, because this is another movie where it's a very underwhelming film. It's boosted by the fact that this is directed by a guy who made a Best Picture winner, and it doesn't really have anything here to make it kind of stand out on its own. It's a film that just like I said, you know how it's going to end. Nothing is going to change the impact of what happens here. And it's just like, what's the point? Like, what's the point of telling the story if we know nothing exciting is going to happen at the end of it? Like, we know what's going to happen at the end of the movie. So, what's the point of even doing it? That's just my take on it. But quick one on that one. That's Last Dance. So let's go ahead and move on to the next movie, and that is David Schwimmer and Gwyneth Paltrow in The Pallbearer. Again, a movie with a lot of good talent on board here. I mean, David Schwimmer was on Friends, the most popular comedy at the time. Gwyneth Paltrow was a rising star. You have Toni Collette in here, Michael Rappaport, Barbara Hershey, Carol Kane, Biddy Schramm-Monk. It's directed by Matt Reeves, who we know has gone on to become an incredible action director overall with the Cloverfield, the Planet of the Apes movies, the Batman. Jessica Timms, who went on to create Parenthood, had done My So-Called Life at this point. J.J. Abrams was the producer on it. There's so many good pieces there. The movie, however, just can't decide on its tone. Does it want to be a dark comedy? Does it want to be a mainstream comedy? It doesn't really know what direction it wants to go in, and it's PG-13 too. So, again, what direction do you want to go in with a movie like this? And there's nothing that really states that it really has a good idea of what it wants to be. What kind of an angle does it want to take? It's just like, it just doesn't really work. And I think David Schwimmer, is channeling Ross a little too much in here. Like, I think he did a really good job of kind of differencing himself from his character on Friends into a movie in a leading role. Like some of the Friends actors who made it into movies afterwards, at least were able to try to distance themselves from their persona on TV. I mean, we just had Matt LeBlanc in Ed, which was not a very good movie, and it showed, and kind of the same reasons why David Schwimmer here doesn't work here, because you just see Ross from Friends, like you see Joey in the movie Ed when you watch that movie, and it just wasn't funny, really. Like, it didn't really have a ton of good laughs to it. It wasn't really all that engaging or intriguing. It just felt like kind of a mess. It felt like a film that had a good idea, had some good ideas that could have worked here. You have some likable leads in here, but there's just nothing about it that really sticks out about this. Their chemistry doesn't work very well. The comedy doesn't work very well. The tone shift is all over the place. Pallbearer just didn't work. And luckily, everyone in here went on to do bigger and better things, because this movie did not work on a number of levels. So, That's the pallbearer. And speaking of movies that don't work on another levels, that's our next movie that we're going to look at. Pam Anderson starring in Barbed Wire. Where do you even begin with a movie like this? I think we all know some of the reasons why this movie does not work whatsoever. First off, they use a plot that's similar to Casablanca, which is really odd in this particular situation here. I mean, we've seen movies that use the plot of Casablanca to actually make a decent film. The movie Out Cold comes up as a perfect example of that. Like that's a movie that really surprisingly uses the plot of Casablanca and actually does use it very well. We'll eventually get to that one in a couple of years, but it's actually a pretty good movie when you think about it. This movie does not have that whatsoever. It's a movie that tries. It falls in the same category as something like Tank Girl or Judge Dredd. They prefer the style over the substance. They don't really have a good idea. They don't really have a good script to work off of, so they basically just say, put all the money to the visuals. We'll make the visuals look pretty good, and the visuals for the most part are pretty good for the most part here. It could have easily been a fun, campy movie. I mean, this really is a setup for a fun, campy movie, but they just take it way too seriously. Like, this is a movie that wants to be incredibly serious on so many levels. And let's get to the elephant in the room here. Pam Anderson does not work very well here in this movie here. Like, she's not very good in this role. I mean, yeah, she's got the body for it. She's got the look for Barbed Wire, but other than that, it did not work at all. And the fact that she did her own stunts and she had to wear these high heels and a corset the whole time, it makes these fight scenes look incredibly difficult to shoot. And they were difficult to shoot, apparently. But Pam Anderson is also not helping, too, when she can't really deliver lines right. Like, she has to be both dramatic and comedic at the same time. But her performance is just so bland. There's just nothing there that makes her look at this and go, that makes me look at this and go, I see where she's coming as an actress. I've actually seen her in stuff where she actually does act, like in Baywatch. She actually does act a little bit. Home Improvement, when her career started, she acted in that. Even the stuff that wasn't really all that great, like Stacked, the show that was on in the 2000s, or Stripperella, which is not a great show, but at least she's trying in there. I can believe that performance more than I can believe in this. Like, she delivers lines in this movie that are so bland and uninventive. Like, she's only just reading it to cash the paycheck, and then that's it. And then she's trying to be like this feminine icon by trying to say things, with her big catchphrase being "Don't call me babe." Like, apparently that's apparently if you say that, that's all. It makes you an instant likable female action heroine. And no, that really isn't it. You actually need to have something that actually gives you a little bit of a spark is actually about purpose to being in a movie like this. And this movie really does not have that whatsoever. It's a film that's just really, really bad on so many levels. It's not even a good it's not a good movie by any means. It's a waste of time and effort. It's just a bad movie. It's a film that was doomed right from the start. At least I think it was doomed from the start, but it was just like, it just didn't work. It was a mess on so many levels, and nobody's ever tried to touch this material again, because really, I don't know what you could do to kind of fix this. Like, this is kind of just like, bottom line, the movie just isn't very good. That's just what I'm trying to go for here. The movie just isn't very good. And that's pretty much all I got for you on that one. Barbed Wire, yeah, that was not very good whatsoever. So let's move on to another movie. Let's move on to the next movie, and that is I Shot Andy Warhol. So this is the directorial debut of Mary Harron, whose next movie would actually become her most successful film with American Psycho. But this is the story of Valerie Solanas and her relationship with the artist Andy Warhol, with Lily Taylor playing the role of Valerie in this, and Jared Harris playing Andy Warhol. And you're following her story. You've also got Martha Plimpton playing her friend, Stephen Dorff playing the Warhol superstar Candy Darling, John Cale, the Velvet Underground, wrote the score for this movie. I've never really seen this movie. But knowing this filmmaker and some of the work she's done, I mean, American Psycho, The Rules of Attraction, some very good films. I don't doubt that this is probably a good film too. It's got some pretty good reviews for it. The idea is very good. Jared Harris kind of looks like Andy Warhol. Like, he looks like straight up like Andy Warhol. So So yeah, this movie could actually be pretty good, but I really don't know too much about it to really know for sure because I haven't seen the film, but I definitely want to check it out one day. So that's quick one on that one. That's I Shot Andy Warhol. Let's move on to another movie, and that's another version of Madame Butterfly. So this is actually the second time I've covered a version of Madame Butterfly on this show. We talked about the David Cronenberg film from 1993, M Butterfly, but this is one that's a French musical version directed by Frederic Mitterrand. And I don't really know much about this one either because I've never seen it before. I never really knew it even existed until I did the research for it. But I couldn't even find any footage of a trailer or just the little footage that I found there. I don't even know if that's from this exact version of it. But from what I can tell, it's straight up the same version of Madame Butterfly as the opera. So that's really all I got for you. I've never seen it before, so I can't really delve into it too much. Quick one on that one as well. Let's move on to the last movie that we have here, and that is Robert Wuhl's Open Season. It should probably tell you something that this movie has no real relevance or significance because when I tried to look for this movie on Wikipedia, there was literally nothing there. It just said Open Season, a movie directed by Robert Wuhl, and that's pretty much it. And this actually came out before Robert Wuhl found success with Our List. Is in 1996. It was actually made in 95. The basic premise is you can kind of tell an ex-employee of a TV ratings company goes to work at this television station when suddenly the computer that determines the ratings have a malfunction, so that is inaccurately reporting a sudden trend from the normal violence, sex, and gore on network television to the artsy PBT shows, which is the name of the company, Public Broadcasting Television. And I've never seen this movie before, so again, I can't really delve into it too much, but it's got some ideas to it that could be very interesting, some notable names in there, but the fact that it doesn't really have a whole lot online to really delve into, I don't know if it's any good or not, so I really don't have anything else to add to that one, but yeah, that's pretty much everything I can tell you about this one, Open Season. So, with that said, that wraps up another edition of Time About the Movies. Next time we meet, we'll have 7 movies to look at, including the first big summer release, Twister. We also have Original Gangstas, Boys, Dead Man, Cold Comfort Farm, Of Love and Shadows, and The Lowlife. 7 movies to look at next time, and we'll delve into those on the next episode. But until then, thank you very much for watching, and if you want to see more videos like this, please hit the playlist on the next page, check out the previous episode, and I'll see you guys tomorrow for another episode. So thank you for watching, I'll see you next time, and until then, as always, take care.